At this time, please welcome Mike Smith, Kitty Ledbetter.
Thank you very much. I'll get rid of this and make it a handheld soon enough. All right, folks, thanks for being here tonight. I'm going to use an acronym to introduce our guest tonight, and the word is BEAM, B-E-A-M. And we're talking about broadcaster, educator, author, and musician. And there's some other letters I could throw in there, but it would make no sense. It would be gibberish. But Kitty Ledbetter, let's welcome our guest, Kitty Ledbetter. BEAM. Kitty has deep roots in the Ozarks, family-wise, and she is a Springfield native. And she is a co-author of the latest book, one of the latest books from the University of Arkansas Press, Broadcasting the Ozarks, Siman and Country Music at the Crossroads. Now, this is just published in April, I believe, and a bio it is of music publisher and promoter, producer, entrepreneur at times, Siman. And it also follows or offers up a history of a local radio history and television history with Siman at the helm of the Ozark Jubilee. This book written by and co-written by Kitty Ledbetter, the lead author, and her co-author is Scott Foster Siman, son of Siman. And if I can go on before I even get to Kitty, sorry for pulling taffy, but Scott Siman has some bona fides, and let me tell you a few of those about her co-author here. Former chair and president of the Academy of Country Music, board member of the Country Music Foundation, and president of EM.co, overseeing management of several country artists, including Tim McGraw right now. Now, we're here tonight to talk about Kitty Ledbetter's bona fides and her relationship to music throughout her whole life. And we're going to get to that book as well, of course, to talk about this great book, which I think is very important to those who follow history of country music. So let's start at the beginning before we get into books and things like that. Your upbringing.
Well, I was born in Paso Robles, California. My dad was in the Army, and my mother was a cadet nurse there at the camp. And I know that I was conceived behind the rifle range at Camp Roberts, California. Because my mom was a nurse, and she knew exactly when that happened. So that may be what's wrong with me and what's been wrong with me all of my life. I don't know. I just had to be somewhere else all the time.
Did your dad pick up the brass? Whoa.
I missed that one.
Okay. Some folks might.
Well, Mom brought me back to Springfield when I was, I think I was about a month old. And I've been here ever since, except all the other times, okay, which you have a full record of. And I grew up in Springfield, went to Hickory Hills and Pershing, and I went to Glendale, and I went to SMS. And SMS.
Well, you've got parents and grandparents, or parents that are deep into the hills and hollers here.
Yeah, both sides of my family are from Ozark County, Missouri, about which I write a lot. My grandparents on my father's side were in Theodosia, Missouri, and there's actually a Ledbetter Hollow down there by Bull Shoals Lake. The family goes steep there. And my mother's parents were in Wasola, Missouri, which is almost in Douglas County, and they owned the Y Store. If you've been to Wasola, there's an old store there. That was their store, and my mother and all of her family grew up in that store.
When did music enter your consciousness as a kid? Do you have remembrances of how or what music affected you growing up?
Well, I would say that my mother started it. She was a singer, and she was in the Sweet Adelines. But before that, she was in a little a kids quartet, I guess. They sang on the radio back in the 30s. They were called the Wassola Fairies, and I have pictures of them. On my father's side, my grandmother sang in church, and she was with 2 sets of twins in her family. And this old country church down in Ludi, Missouri, it was the kind of church where the preacher gets up there and says, "Y'all come sing." No, I'm sorry, he didn't say y'all. He says, "Yuns come sing." Yuns come up here and sing. And so my grandmother and her twin sister and the other set of twins would go up to the front, and I would go up with them and stand between my grandmother and her sister and sing when I was this old, all the way up. So I sort of developed an ear for harmonies. I didn't have the voice to sing lead, unfortunately. But that's really where it started.
You know what was played around the house when you were growing up on the radio?
We always had a piano, and every time we went to Grandma's house, not my father's mother, but my mother's family, they had musicians. One of my cousins was a performer. She was a classical musician, pianist, and they always got around the piano and just sang. Everybody sang. That's just what you did when it was Easter or Christmas, or that's just what we did.
Okay. Well, okay, the first letter of the word beam is, well, the first letter is B for broadcaster in my case, in your case too. So how did you get into the broadcasting business? And we will talk about some of her jobs here. She worked here in Missouri, also in Texas, on the radio we're talking, North Carolina, what did I miss? Louisiana.
South Carolina, I didn't put that on the list.
And I want to throw out another one a little bit later after you tell us about getting into radio here in Springfield and beyond.
Well, that was just luck. I was working at a bank. My cousin came over to me at my desk. I worked at the bank. She also worked at the bank. She said that KTTS had put an ad on the radio that said they needed a copywriter. And I didn't know what a copywriter was, but it sounded like a writer, which is what I wanted to do. And I called and got the last interview for the day, and I got the job, and my cousin never spoke to me again. And then, so I started as a copywriter, and Barefoot Bob Kinney was across the hall. He was doing AM. AM was the station then. Nobody listened to FM. And Barefoot wanted to put me on the radio. Actually, the FCC handed down a command to the radio stations to hire more women on the air. So that was in 1973. So Don Paul, my program director, came up to my office and said, "How'd you like to be on the radio?" And I said, "Oh, sure." I didn't know anything about it, but Barefoot had been putting me on his noon show, and I would walk across the hall and sit with Barefoot and give the egg report, and he named me Miss Kitty. He'd say, "Hey, Miss Kitty, give us the egg report," and we'd chat a little bit, and I'd say, "Okay, Barefoot, here's the egg report," and then I'd go back to my job as a copywriter. But pretty quickly, Don Paul said, "Okay, we're going to put you on FM." Nobody listened to FM. We'll train you there. So I worked for 45 minutes working the Ralph Emery Show, which was on a record. And I would break in for breaks. And then I would do another hour on the air as a disc jockey. And Larry Knight taught me how to run the turntable and what you say. And I don't know, I was always pretty talky, and it seemed pretty natural for me to get on the radio and talk. So I just kept it up, and that was the start of it.
What was Bob Kinney like, Barefoot Bob?
Oh, he was my buddy. I miss him so much. We became really good friends. We went out to his house many times and partied. I mean, I'm not going to tell you about those parties. Anyway.
Barefoot Bob?
It was a lot of fun. Barefoot loved to drink beer and talk about World War II and country music. And so he taught me to love old country music. And I love World War II. And I'm just a big fan of it always, especially country music, because he had all these records and he would play all of them while we're all getting drunk. And really, we would get 7 cases of beer for 6 people at these parties. I'm telling you. Sometimes Barefoot would end up in the closet, and sometimes not, but it was a whole lot of fun. And Tucker, his wife, would do the same, and we had nicknames for everybody. Her name was Tucker, and I called her Tuck. And their little grandson called me Cock because I was Kathy. So it just Tuck and Cock. I don't know how it got that way, but you think some of you might understand.
Well, from KTTS, which state and which radio station did you head off to?
I went to, I got a job at Houston at KILT. That was a big move from KTTS. But I went down there and I worked there for a couple of years, and it was huge, going from Springfield, Missouri to Houston.
Board operator.
Oh yeah, I was on the air.
Okay. And format there?
Country.
Okay. What were you learning about the trade as you went from station WKRP? Let's quote that up and down the dial, I guess. What did you take away from all that yourself? Some personal gains from all that?
I just tried to get better, and each program director helped me do that because he would say, we'd listen to air checks, and here's what you need to do better. And I just tried to do better, be more natural, try to be more fluid, try to be more powerful as I got to larger stations, because they don't want, in KTTS, you might be personality, but that wasn't personality. When you get to major markets, you're not doing personality. You're doing cards, and you're doing introductions, and you're doing promotions, and you don't make mistakes, and you don't screw it up because you're in a bigger market, and you have to be better. And so I just learned how to get better. And as I moved to Charlotte, when I worked in Charlotte, North Carolina, I was music director there. And I was also music director at KWKH in Shreveport, Louisiana. And that was a lot of fun because I got to do the big stuff, the fun stuff with all the artists. I was the one who brought the artists in for a visit on the station on air. We got to do backstage and introductions on stage, and it was a lot of fun.
And that knowledge and experience helped you out a little later on in print journalism as well. Texas, Missouri, Texas, Louisiana after that?
Are you trying to get a
or North
chronology
Carolina?
here?
I
Because
am.
you're going to get in trouble here.
I am. North Carolina, then Louisiana?
No. Okay. You asked for it.
I did.
All right. Springfield, Houston, Europe,
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm going to get
Paris,
there. Okay.
Shreveport.
She stole my thunder. She worked in
worked for-
Paris at a radio station in Paris, France.
I worked for WSM for a little while, not full-time, part-time. Then I went to Charlotte. And then I went to South Carolina and worked for a little while on a rock station down there because I was going to school and I wanted to pay my way. Then I worked for Oklahoma City at KXY for a little while, part-time.
Hey, man, those are a few extra places. But okay, I knew Paris. I wanted to throw that out there in a surprising sort of way, but thanks. Tell us about doing some board shifts at a radio station in France. And do you speak French?
No, and this really isn't worth talking about because it was a very short period of time. But it isn't, I did work at a radio station in Paris. There was a little article in the English-speaking newspaper in Paris, and I had been there for a couple of months, staying with a woman that I met. She had just gotten a divorce and wanted me to stay in her apartment. She had an extra room. So this guy that I talked to said, "Oh, great, we can make this a top 40 station like the United States. Wonderful." So I would ride the metro it was up in the north part around Montparnasse, which is not a great part of Paris, but I would ride the metro up there and do a little shift, and it was actually like one of these tables with a microphone stretched up the top on a wire and a rack of a few albums. And that was really all there was to it. And I just tried to make up a format as I went. He didn't really care. I'm not even sure I had any listeners, really.
What did you play? What'd you play?
Oh, I don't even remember. It wasn't country music. They didn't have any country music. It was just, sometimes they'd have an album that I recognized. There might be a French album somewhere. I just put something on and played disc jockey.
All right. Well, a writer and author, the next letter is A for author, but a writer for sure. While she was in North Carolina, well, let's see, are we right? Yeah, we are there. I got the right letter, yes. Educator, pardon me.
That goes last.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Okay.
The word being.
You're in charge.
But, okay, educator, PhD in English from?
University of South Carolina.
Thank you.
MA in North Carolina.
And you worked in North Carolina, though, right?
Okay, you need help, Mike.
And I do. I need help.
Okay,
But
so
she wrote for the Charlotte Observer, is where I'm getting at. She wrote columns for the Charlotte Observer. What kind of columns?
music, feature articles on music, musicians who were coming to town to introduce them, sort of promoting the show.
Well, a couple of these names, and the list is that long of the folks that she has. There's a whole pocket full of articles there from the Charlotte Observer written by Kitty Ledbetter, Charlie Bird, Chuck Mangione, Arlo Guthrie, Chet Atkins, Conway Twitty, Emmylou Harris, Hank Williams Jr., David Grisman, Kenny Rogers, Lyle Lovett. This is just a few now. Anne Murray, Newgrass Revival, Nitty Gritty, Randy Travis, Tony Rice. Throw that out there for all this acoustic fans out there. So again, that's just a few of them. That's really quite a list.
Well, I'm always been kind of an activist. I mean, I noticed they didn't have anybody covering entertainment, so I called the Charlotte Observer and I said, hey, David Grisman's going to be in town. Do you need an article on that? And they'd say, yeah, do that. I mean, it was so easy. It's incredible how easy it is to get that kind of work. And so I just had to be proactive about it. Nobody was going to call me and say, hey, would you do David Grisman this week? Because there was nobody there in charge of entertainment. Nobody was doing it. So I just saw a place where I could enter. And that's kind of been my philosophy for everything from the beginning, is you just look for an empty space and fill it. And that was one of the empty spaces in Charlotte. They had this great newspaper, and nobody was covering David Grisman coming to town. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I got to do that, and they're all in a little packet over there, copied.
Now, while you were in North Carolina, let's go to the education thing here, the PhD in English or writing abilities, etc. I'd like you to share the story that you told me yesterday about getting into the PhD program and how that came about. And when I heard the story, I compared Kitty to Radar O'Reilly and her person that she was working with to Colonel Potter, or any of the two, the other colonel too. So tell us about how you were Radar O'Reilly to get into the degree program there.
Well, can I tell them what happened to get me there first?
You've got the time.
So when I was in Houston, I was in Houston my second year at KILT, and I had gone down there from Springfield, Missouri, and I had done nothing really except work at KTTS and a lot of other odd jobs, and I just wanted to do something different. I wanted to do more. And so a friend of mine said, well, why don't you just make a dream list? And so I made a dream list, and at the bottom of the list, since it didn't have to come true, it was just a dream list, I always wanted to be an English professor. It was a dream list. Couldn't come true because I wasn't qualified. I didn't have the background for that. I was a B student, and but I was in Charlotte, and there was a graduate school in town, and I said, well, I'll start. What do you do to get from A to B? You just start with what's in front of you, what's easiest to do. The easiest thing to do is apply. You can't get anywhere if you don't apply. So I applied, and I got into the master's program, got finished with that, and then I thought, oh, I could be an English professor, but it takes 4 to 6 years to get a PhD, master's degree only 2 years. What are you going to do? Well, you can apply. Well, I applied, and they wouldn't let me in. They rejected me because I wasn't qualified, and I knew it. I made a straight A's on my master's degree program, but everybody on a PhD program makes straight A's. They were not impressed. So what am I going to do? I want to do this. And somebody said, just go until the door slams in your face. And so I harassed this graduate director. I said, let me send you another writing sample. And he said, okay. And he says, finally at the end of the summer, before the people would go to school, I called him and I said, Dr. Scott, what do I have to do to get in there? And he said, well, I'll let you in on a non-degree status for 12 hours, and you can prove yourself, and at the end of the 12 hours, you're out. You're going to pay for the 12 hours. You're not going to get any money from the university. And so I went in, and of course, kicked myself, just did everything I could possibly do to get good grades, and I made straight A's in all the first year. And I went into the graduate director's office, and there was another graduate director there. That old guy that wouldn't let me in was not in there. And I just said, I just have this entry paper you need to sign. He says, oh, okay.
That's the way to do it.
More luck, just
it?
persevere. He's at the end of my graduate school experience and my PhD. I was graduating. I had a job. I had published more than anybody in the department. And Dr. Scott, who wouldn't let me in, I said, I just wanted to say thank you for letting me in for that first year. And he said, well, Kitty, one thing I'm for sure is that you've got what it takes to get through graduate school, and that's perseverance.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, somewhere along the way of this journey, Kitty also started a continual opportunity to rub shoulders with a lot of great musicians from around the world by getting together with this guy in the front row and marrying Alan Mundy, world-renowned banjo player. And so, I mean, I know the world in which you have come from and exist today.
Stop talking about him.
But you started hanging around some really great folks, at least in my acoustic and bluegrass world, that is.
Well, since I've been with him, for sure.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun. And I wrote, if you're a bluegrass fan, one of my writing experiences early in the 70s, I started writing for Pick-In Magazine and some other things that were bluegrass-oriented, and I brought those copies there if you want to look at those.
There's a 1999 Bluegrass Unlimited article by Kitty. It's over there on the table.
It's called Life After Country Radio.
As well. Okay, so let's turn to this latest, your work as an author, and the Broadcasting the Ozarks, Siman, and country music at the crossroads. I'm actually going to draw from a lot here with my comments and questions from the inner cover. This from the University of Arkansas Press, I believe, probably composed that.
Oh.
I don't know. Did they?
I might have written it.
Oh, very good. Well, let's start off here. Broadcasting the Ozarks explores the vibrant country music scene that emerged in Springfield, Missouri in the 1930s and thrived for half a century. Central to this history is the Ozark Jubilee, which ran from 1955 to 60. It was the first regularly broadcast live country music show on network television. Pardon me. Dubbed the King of the Televised Barn Dances, the show introduced the Ozarks to viewers across America and put Springfield in the running with Nashville for the dominance of the country music industry, with the Jubilee's producer, Siman, at the helm. Siman central to this story as well, as he was at the helm. Now, this book here opens with a question, and I'm going to paraphrase it, a question to documentarian and filmmaker Ken Burns. Hey, Ken, what are we, chopped liver? Right? Explain that.
Well, I see Wayne Glenn there nodding his head. And I think anybody who saw Ken Burns' country music series a few years ago, there's a huge hole in that history, and he doesn't talk about the Ozark Jubilee or Springfield, Missouri. And I just think, well, the reason for that is that he went straight to Nashville to produce and write that show, and he went to Marty Stewart as a guide. Marty Stewart gave him who to see, made appointments for him, showed him around Nashville. And so that whole production of Country Music USA is mostly what Marty Stewart, Johnny Cash's son-in-law, saw country music as. But the truth is, in the 1940s, 1950s, mid-1950s, when the Ozark Jubilee went on the air, Nashville was not Music City, USA. It was not a music row. They had some country music artists who went there to work on the Grand Ole Opry. But in 1955, when Ozark Jubilee came on national television, it was the only national televised country music show in history. No, that was
It became in color later.
that was
yeah.
not the Ozark Jubilee.
The
That was the five-star
Jubilee. Yeah.
So the Ozark Jubilee was. There's a fly.
Yeah, there is.
It's probably somebody's perfume. But so you had to go to the Jubilee if you wanted to be a big country music star. That was what we had here, was television. What Nashville had was a radio show, just like the ones in Chicago, Big D in Dallas, Shreveport. All the big cities had these country music radio shows, but none of them had television. We were the only ones. So I guess that's what you're asking me.
Yeah, and why didn't Ken Burns?
Because he didn't come here and talk to me about it.
Yeah, or any of us.
Any of us.
For that matter. But you'd think, maybe having a relationship to Johnny Cash, with him, he might have recognized that because Cash was here. Johnny Cash came here with a lot of other folks to the Ozark.
Everybody
Jubilee.
who played at the Grand Ole Opry that was alive from 1955 to 1960, except Hank Snow, came to the Ozark Jubilee and more. So there's a list in that packet that's available over there on the table of a few of the country artists who performed on the Ozark Jubilee and how many of those are now in the Hall of Fame. It's amazing.
I want to note that Cy Simon's daughter and son-in-law are in the audience here tonight as well.
Janie.
Randall and Janie Chowning. Let me continue on this inside cover. Cy Simon's life story is almost as remarkable as the show he produced. Now, this kills me here. He was booking Tommy Dorsey, Ella Fitzgerald, and Glenn Miller during the mid-1930s while a student in high school, and produced nationally syndicated country music shows in the decades that followed. Okay, booking all these folks while a student in high school?
Yes.
Okay, how'd that come about now? Come on.
Well, Cy was a guy that got into everything he could see. He just looked for opportunities, and he was working for Half a Hill. He was working for Mr. Hickman at Half a Hill, and Mr. Hickman decided he was going to start booking big bands at the Shrine Mosque, and Cy just said, I can help Mr. Hickman. And of course, and Mr. Hickman died, and Cy took over, and the rest is history. Cy was booked Ella Fitzgerald. Ella Fitzgerald, after her first single, her first big hit. Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, all the big band guys played there. And then in the 1940s, there's also, it's interesting if y'all are interested in World War II history, Cy has a very interesting story there as well. But after he got out of World War II, he just came right back to Ralph Foster at KTTS and started working, just hit the ground running, promoting shows, booking bands, helping with the live radio show that was a national radio show from Springfield, Missouri called Corns of Kraken. And
now, I want to get to how he and Ralph Foster developed that relationship, but let's go back a little bit to his school years. And as a young man, he was crazy about baseball. And Cy Simon was a bat boy for our Springfield, or the St. Louis Cardinals minor league team that was here at the time, Springfield Cardinals, right? So can you talk about that as well, his
Sure.
love for baseball and the work he did that was important to his life?
Sure, he played with the baseball with the little the teams little boys play. What's it called? Little League? No, not Little League. Kids. No.
Back then, yeah, it was something else.
What? What'd you say, Mark? Yes, they did. No, I don't know about you. Anyway, he played with kids' teams. He played on kids' teams, and he became a bat boy, and he helped. What? No. Little League.
In this case, it was the Brer Fox baseball team.
Thank you.
Brer Fox baseball team.
Anyway, and he was also, he was a bat boy, and then he was also the driver for Cardinals scout Charlie Barrett. So if you know your baseball history, you know that was a big deal because Charlie Barrett booked, he got several of the really hotshot baseball players for the Cardinals. Do you have that page numbered here? How many, who they were?
I do not, but I...
Okay.
Yeah, and listen, all the things we're talking about here, don't forget the book. And you can grab a copy if you haven't already.
That was the St. Louis Cardinals.
The St. Louis Cardinals, right.
Once in a while, yeah, when he was up there.
Yeah.
Here's the ones that Charlie Barrett booked. J. Hannah Dizzy Dean,
Dizzy Dean.
Paul Daffy Dean, Frankie Frisch, Johnny Pepper Martin, Joe Ducky Medwick. And those are just some of the. Junior Siman, which was Cy Siman, he had a 1934 World Series ring that Scott now has. So this is how deep they were into baseball in the 1930s.
And this is before high school even for Cy.
He
right,
was a
into
scout
baseball,
driver
right.
for Charlie Barrett when he was in high school during summer sessions.
Absolutely.
Oh, Smarty Pants over here wants to say something. Janie and I travel the road together to sign books, and she's the color. They call her the color. Stand up so they can see you and hear you. You wanted to talk. Stand up and talk.
Okay, well, talking about Uncle Ralph and Daddy
Uncle Ralph.
acquainted with him. When Daddy was about 10 years old, he had an orange crate and he put wheels on it and put dry ice in it. And he went around town selling popsicles so he could make enough money for he and his dad to go see the Cardinals play. So when he went into Uncle Ralph's office, he gave him his spiel, And Uncle Ralph said, yeah, I'll buy popsicles. And so Daddy went around everybody in the building, not just the people that worked there, but anybody that just happened to be there, and gave them all a popsicle. And then he went down to Uncle Ralph's office and said, this is what you owe me. And Uncle Ralph said, now wait a minute, that wasn't the deal. And Daddy said, oh yeah, it was. You told me to give one to everybody, so I did. And this is what you owe me. And Uncle Ralph said, you want to go to work for me? And Daddy said, oh no, I've got my own business and business is good.
Excellent. So he had that entrepreneurial spirit early on. Okay, I'm going to read from another paragraph here. We'll continue to talk about the great Cy Siman. Let's see here. Siman was a promotional genius with an ear for talent, a persuasive gift for gab, and the energy and persistence to make things happen for many future country music star and Hall of Famers, including Chet Atkins. And who had Chet Atkins' name? Changed the name to Chet?
Cy Siman.
Cy Siman.
He said, Chester's just not a very good entertainment name, and we'll just make it Chet. And Chet loved it, and he kept it all his life. He loved living in Springfield, by the way. He lived here on Pacific Street at the same time that the Carter family lived on Walnut Street. He worked here twice on KTTS and lived in Springfield, Missouri, right here in Springfield, Missouri. Along with a lot of other artists that are in the Hall of Fame and made great difference in music business.
Yeah, the Carters, too.
Sorry? Twice fired, yes. Yes.
Okay, he was, following the run of the Jubilee's 5-year run, again, 55 to 60, Siman had a hand in some of the greatest hits of the 20th century as a music publisher. Now, let's talk about that.
Yeah, and I want you, another thing that's in that handout over there on the table, I'm still barefoot, is a list of some of the hits that Cy Siman was responsible for published. And the biggest one, of course, is Always on My Mind. And there's quite a bit of the last chapter on that song, how much trouble he had getting that recorded. Also, the biggest one, the first one was The Letter by the Box Tops. And usually when I go to talk about the book, nobody has ever heard The Letter because they're stupid and young. But
And Cy Siman had a pretty special relationship with Wayne Carson, who wrote that tune and Always on My Mind.
Yeah, I don't think my book has
some other
that
great
appendix.
ones. They had a very special friendship, and with Ronnie Self, here as well, Springfield and Ronnie Self.
Let me name some of the songs that you will remember that that Cy published. Company's Comin'. We know that Johnny Mullins song. That was by Porter Wagner. Let's see, One Step at a Time from Brenda Lee. Somebody Like Me, Eddie Arnold, The Letter, from the Box Tops, Neon Rainbow from the Box Tops, Who's Julie from Mel Tillis, Tulsa from Waylon Jennings, Soul Deep from the Box Tops. Oh, there's many more. I'm not going to read them all because I know Mike wants to get on with it. I See the Want To in Your Eyes from
This is
Conway
it.
Twitty. She's Acting Single, I'm Drinking Doubles, Gary Stewart. Rocky from Dickie Lee. Barstool Mountain from Wayne Carson, but that was also Mo Bandy. Slide Off Your Satin Sheets, Johnny Paycheck. 10 Years of This, Gary Stewart. Bugle Ann, that was another Wayne Carson song. And, okay, I'll stop.
Well,
Hundreds of songs.
from page 146, Siman decided that the way to help his writers have successful careers was to find out what not to do. He often referred to songwriting as a craft more than an art. He referred to it as a craft, meaning writers needed to work hard to master the nuances of songwriting. Let's talk about that. If he heard a tune he just didn't have the feel for, he didn't take it. He just said, let's talk another time.
But I think he was real responsive. He tried to help
Yeah,
songwriters.
that he
His
did.
office was always open. Some of you know, Bill Jones knows more than anybody probably, and Randy, that you could just go into Cy's office and sit and read Billboard. By the way, this is Bill Jones over here. If y'all haven't met Bill Jones. He is one of Springfield's greatest musicians ever.
Absolutely.
So Bill might tell you, Larry Lee was frequent in Cy's office, and Cy would read your song and say, we don't tear the woman down. We don't want to bash women. We want the woman to be lifted up. And that was one of the things that the songwriters really didn't like so well, because they wanted to do their own story. But Cy would say, he wanted hit records. He didn't want you to sit around feeling good writing your own songs and, tell everybody about it and sing it at parties. He wanted something that would be a hit. And he thought he could hear songs that were going to be hits. He didn't hear all of them. He
missed a few.
He missed a few.
But not many.
He missed a couple of songwriters. In particular, Bill Rice and Jerry Foster brought him songs. And they said, no, those aren't going to be a whole cassette full of songs. And they went away thinking, well, he's not going to help us. They wrote hundreds of songs and made many hits. And then, of course, Jerry Jeff Walker and Mr. Bojangles. They missed that one big time.
Yeah, I guess the story was he was out to lunch with Chet. Was that the story?
Mm-hmm.
Cy Siman was eating lunch somewhere in Nashville, and Jerry Jeff Walker approached them, and Cy said, "No, I don't think so." But
They had a golf game to go to.
But yeah, let's talk again. That kind of thing. So that's just one of those. But then you turn to Always on My Mind and some of these fantastic hits, and just some of those that from the list that you just drew from there. He knew what a hit song was. And one of my memories from that are mentioned in this book, and also the book that Wayne wrote here, History of Springfield Music, it was about the time that Cy Siman got things together to take Louis and the 7 Days to Vietnam on a USO tour.
Bill went on that.
Yeah, Bill's
Bill's
there.
been on all of them. He's been everywhere, man.
Yeah. So 19 days in 1966. Wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And Cy booked
he said
those.
25. He said he traveled about 25,000 miles and had 19 shows. Okay. Yeah. And in the book here, and maybe in Wayne's as well, Larry Lee talks about, hearing gunfire fairly close by to your performances in Vietnam. But that always drew me to one of Cy Simon's great things, to get together folks for a USO tour.
And Gary Ellison went on one of those as well.
Oh, Department of Defense. Okay. Even better.
Mm-hmm.
Honorary major colonels.
Oh, he became an honorary major colonel?
Wouldn't have like a major giving us snot-nosed kids any trouble. He's a lieutenant.
Okay. Well, Kitty, here you are. You've gone through a lot of these presentations to talk about the book. You've done several. You've traveled around the Ozarks here with Janie and with others to present what's available here. What have you taken away from this?
Well, I was not allowed to go to a lot of shows in Springfield when I was growing up because my dad wouldn't let me go out. And so I missed all the things that Music Monday talks about all the time. I mean, I didn't go to the Bijou. I didn't go to the concerts because I couldn't. So now I get to write about it. And it's kind of, I hope that's a good thing because I can have some distance and I can interview people and see what happened and who was involved. And I feel like I probably know a little more about it than I would have if I had gone to the shows, because I'm pretty sure I would have, knowing what I was joining in with everything that was going on there, but I just wasn't at the show. So that, and I've met a lot of wonderful people. I want to say that John Richardson is here, whose father was Don Richardson, who worked as a writer on the Ozark Jubilee. Not only that, but he named Silver Dollar City. And John himself worked in the Dolly Parton show down there. How many years? 22 years he worked with Dolly Parton.
Wow.
It's just incredible how much talent we have here in the Ozarks.
Can you tell about working with Scott Foster Simon, Janie's brother and Cy's son?
Scott is incredible. This guy has a company. He's been managing Tim McGraw for 20 years. They have a company. They meet on Monday mornings. This is kind of like what it is. They meet on Monday mornings and say, what are we going to do with Tim McGraw this week? It's just incredible. He got them all of those movie gigs that you've seen him in the movies. A lot of people were introduced to him through that. Scott is busy all the time. He's a entertainment business attorney, started there, and then his dad sort of brought him into the music business when he was a little kid, practically. So Scott was born in the music business. He's so knowledgeable. He's kind of quiet, and you probably knew him in high school if you knew him in Glendale and also not Hillcrest, Kickapoo. And he's unspoken, really. He's not really aggressive, but when he speaks on purpose, and he laughs easily. And I like people who laugh. If they don't laugh, I think they're thinking I'm stupid. So they need to laugh to make me feel better. And plus, it's a lot more fun than moping around. And Scott does not seem to mope around very much. I liked him a lot immediately. But as a co-author, he's been pretty low-key. I don't know if he just thought he'd step back. He did write parts of the first chapter with the baseball, and he wrote parts of the sixth chapter with the entertainment business. And the rest of it, he just kind of laid back. And he didn't really even answer my calls sometimes, but it's okay. He participated. And then when the time came that we had to go to Nashville, and we did interview on the Country Music Hall of Fame. This was 3 or 4 weeks ago. And man, I booked that, but I sure wasn't the reason it got booked because Scott Simon is a big thing in Nashville. Yeah. And everywhere we go, I was already at a conference there, never expected Scott to go with me. But man, when they found out that Scott was going to be there, let's say, they were excited. So it's fun to just hang out in some way with a guy like Scott, who's friendly and sweet, but yet determined and busy all the time. He travels all over with Tim McGraw. And when I started working with Janie and Scott, I couldn't believe it. I was just, what's Scott doing today? Oh, Tim and Faith came over, and they were just, eating dinner and Tim and Faith was in your living room? What? So I just get to watch.
Well, I think we can take a few questions from
Who's Don?
the folks. And I will repeat through the microphone, if I may, so we can get this on tape. Carol first? No. Or I'll repeat the question.
Okay, I can speak loud.
Or I'll repeat the question as well.
Okay, Kitty, I was wondering, first of all, I want to say you're such an amazingly open woman and so giving in how all that you've gone through, you have the generosity to allow other stories to come in. Second, I want to say...
She's been this way as long as I've known her.
Okay, hang on a second. She said, Kitty, you're such a wonderful and amazing woman.
So what did you say?
Story or tonight. And also, Lyle Lovett. Oh my God.
Lyle Lovett, oh my God.
Divorced him, she was an idiot. Second or third, or that would be 1A and 2, any Monty Python fans. How many women preceded you at KTTS?
Well, I mean, that's...
Okay, hang on a second, please. That last question I can repeat. At KTTS, you were how many women preceded you? And I know the answer to that at KTTS, and that is?
Well, Kurt Brown told me that I was the first female disc jockey in Springfield. But the truth was, I never heard another woman on the radio before I started. And it was a couple of years before I heard one. I didn't know what they were supposed to sound like. Finally, I listened to some woman in Kansas City because you could, then you could get your radio under the covers and listen to Kansas City. And so I listened to her for a little while, but she was way beyond me, I thought. And then I started working in Houston, which was the third largest market in the country. So I don't know how that happened, but perseverance.
Question over here.
Occurs to me that Cy Simon should be honored in the Country Music Hall of Fame.
Amen.
That is that.
Can we do as grassroots supporters to make that happen?
Okay, well, first of all, these Hall of Fame nominations and situations go in cycles. And so I think, if I'm right correctly, and Randall, you can correct me, and Janie, I think the next round is next year. Is that correct? So what Scott has to do is the groundwork in Nashville. And this is his groundwork. This is his calling card. And so I think that's why they let me do it. But it is a good calling card. He ordered a lot of books from the press. He made T-shirts. So he's going to start building the interest in Cy Simon. I mean, Cy was a co-founder in the Country Music Association. He was a co-founder. He belongs there. So he has to gather all that information, and it's all in here, and what's not in here, he can tell.
Maybe a little help from corporate.
Yeah, if you want a letter writing campaign, we'll do it.
Well, we'll see.
From
I'm not even
Silver
sure.
Dollar City.
You might call Scott.
There's a committee that does it, and you don't really know who's on the committee. So it's kind of hard to approach them politically and go, hey, Cy should be.
Because you don't know who they are.
And all this questioning has been about the getting Cy Simon into the Country Music Hall of Fame. And I'm saying this on the microphone so we can make sure this is on the record with our tape. Otherwise, there's blank audio on our tape. So I'm trying to keep up with all your questions, too. Other questions, folks, that I can repeat quickly? Anything else?
Bill has a question.
Bill Jones.
Yeah, I keep being asked, Jamie this, I don't know if I should ask you or if I should hold off and ask you afterwards, when you're, and his big son.
Always on my mind.
Always on my mind. I can never remember that name. and it won the Gershwin Prize, which is led to the great prize for songwriters.
Bill Jones is making note that the song Always on My Mind won the Gershwin Prize for songwriting.
Now, what upset me was Willie Nelson got the prize, but Wayne wrote it. And, he had a couple of helpers, but it was all his.
Yeah.
Somebody added a lyric.
Bill took note that Willie Nelson got the prize, but Wayne Carson wrote the tune. And
Willie said he wrote it on Wikipedia.
Willie Nelson said he wrote it on Wikipedia?
Then they changed it.
Okay, so that went out there.
Changed it, but he was taking credit.
How do you unring the bell? Yeah. 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 Any other questions, folks? Well, let's go ahead. Oh, one more question over here, or another question over here.
Actually, what happened in Oklahoma City? What were you doing over there?
What happened? What were you doing in Oklahoma City?
I was working at for a while. I worked, my first job out of graduate school was at Oklahoma Baptist University, and I taught there for 4 years until I couldn't stand it anymore. And then they were it was a very good school, but anyway, so I landed on my feet at the Oklahoma Humanities Council and worked part-time at KXY in Oklahoma City. I got the cup to prove it.
Y'all remember listening to Clear Channel KAAY? Nobody?
That would be
Out west, I was listening to it.
that would be 1999, I think, because I started working at Texas State University in 2020 and worked there for 20 years. 21? Before.
You didn't start in 2000.
20. What was it? 2000. 2000. Forget the 20s. There's too many 20s. Just one T-O.
Well, I want to remind folks that all of our presentations, a lot of our presentations from over the years are available on YouTube channel. Just, look for Music Monday of the Ozarks. And when we come across blank audio with long stretches of silence, just stay with us and follow up. So you can, just search for any of these videos that we have on the YouTube channel.
And if you want to buy a book, I don't have any hardbacks left. None at all, not even at home. I'll have to order some more. But I do have soft cover books over there. They're $25 if you want one. I have credit card or cash.
And she'll sign it off to you, too.
I will.
Let's give a big thank you to Kitty Ledbetter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You did a good job.
We did.